la inițiativa RVEA, dar și a colegilor noștri din ERPIA, de la Wind Europe, Wind Solar, Solar Europe, și de asemenea avocații de la Piper România. Subiectul, așa cum spuneam, se referă la procesul de autorizare a investițiilor noi, în ideea de a simplifica acest proces și, sigur, procedurile subsecvente administrative să fie cât mai scurte, relevante, eficiente și să permită demararea investițiilor atât de necesare în sectorul energiei cât mai curând. Așa cum știm, România este net importatoare de energie electrică de câțiva ani de acum înainte, peste care se suprapun evenimentele sau războiul, dacă dorim, din Ucraina, care vine suplimentar peste pandemia de care am beneficiat în ultimii ani. Acum, nu vreau să rețin, să monopolizez mult discuția, aș dori să discutăm foarte deschis cu colegii noștri din autorități, cărora le mulțumim pe această cale că sunt împreună cu noi, și să discutăm care sunt posibilitățile de a îmbunătăți legislația în ceea ce privește autorizarea, pornind de la nivelul Uniunii Europene și mergând către legislația națională, încercând să analizăm situația actuală, să identificăm principalele bariere și, de asemenea, să împărtășim best practices care pot fi implementate la noi. Distinși invitați din panelul din această dimineață sunt aici împreună cu noi. O să dau pentru început cuvântul domnului Carlo Pinoglioni, care este președintele RVEA. Carlo, you have the floor. Mulțumesc.
Mulțumesc, Adi. Sorry for switching in English. Obviously, I'm honored to make this introductory speech. I don't want to steal too much time for the discussion. I will only to address some ideas about the permitting, because permitting is in a way a well-known process, because actually it's not new. It's since the beginning of this development of renewables. So more than 1 decade ago, the permitting was a process that in a way was taken by different kind of subjects than in the past, because we have to acknowledge that actually the process of developing capacity under renewable technology is a bit different than it was in the past, because actually we know very well we were coming from a world in which power was a niche that was quite technical, in which also the permitting was something that was dealt directly by the owner of the technology at the time, that in many cases were state-owned company, and the same authorities on the other side in a certain location that were let's say, decided together. The revolution coming from renewables and the difference between the last decade is that definitely now renewables are not anymore a niche, but the new way to build capacity in these countries in order to both fulfill the growth in terms of demand, but also to replace, due to the well-known issues for the climate change fight that we have in place, also to replace existing capacity. And that's why in many countries, including Romania, there is also the issue of this missing coal in order to accommodate new capacities in terms of renewables. And it's more than clear that the discussion that we are conducting today is under the so-called EU umbrella, because Romania is part of this of this community in a way that has strongly thought, but also ruled over this issue. Then I'm going to give you my perception of what is permitting. Also, just to play a bit the role, staying a bit as a president everywhere in the middle between the several interests. So permitting, from my standpoint, has been felt for a long time, also by all the all the developers, the investors, as a sort of obligation in order to get there, to get the project, to get the plant. On the other side, the authorities, for a while, just for the reason that I explained, in a way have delegated, because in that case was a sort of niche that was developing some obligation in order to basically fulfill all the needs in order to get the permits. In a way, permitting is the way in which a project is entering basically the set of rules in a country, because actually this is the debate. I have something that I've designed, I have to transform it in a project, in a plant, and obviously I have to match all the rules that the state has given to me. And here, in this very moment, there is the turning point, because for the developers, we have to acknowledge that due to the massive quantity of capacity to be deployed all over Europe, evidently we will impact a bit more than it was in the past. And so it's mandatory to have a sort of sit down among us in order to understand deeply what are the needs for the impact that we are generating to the authorities. On the other hand, from authority standpoints, definitely there is the need to embrace this kind of challenge that is deploying all this capacity, because it's a must to have, not only a nice to have as this was for a while. And only through the dialogue, and obviously REST Simplify is, I would say, a perfect sample of what we should do also at the local level. So it's like a meeting point between these two souls, let's say, the investors and the authorities, not forgetting about the local communities that in a way are going to be impacted, in order to discuss how to, let's say, also shape and take into account the peculiarities maybe of some countries or maybe some areas in order to accommodate this very huge deployment. This is the way in which I see the process, and also I would say the step ahead in order to get to this very important deployment capacity that we will see in the future for the sake of benefits of everybody, I would say, in a sort of democracy of energy that we were discussing about renewables. And so I don't want to steal more time. I'm very interested also to learn, because, in the past I was also an actor in this direction, because I participated to the first wave of investment, but now definitely the challenges are much more stronger. And I'm very honored to introduce this panel, but also to learn not only by the panels, but also for the distinguished guests about the discussion, also maybe the technical discussion that will come. Thanks a lot for the time, and good luck, let's say. Enjoy this webinar. Thanks. Adi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carlo. Indeed, you mentioned the stakeholders involved into this permitting process is not only investors and authorities, but also a local community, which is very important. And I'm sure the awareness from all parties increased over the years, and now we reach some kind of really nice balance, because local communities, they found out that is beneficial to them in terms of jobs, works to be done on the way, taxes to the local budget, and so on. investors, they do feel like welcome here, and also authorities are fully supporting our efforts, and results are there, meaning the permitting is not the best, but one of the best in EU in terms of timing. So we are among the first, but definitely always the things can be improved. Sorry for my Romanian. Whenever I was opening the webinar. Now I'm back with the English, and it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Zoltán Nog, the most active ANDRE Vice President, being here with us and fully supporting not only the conference. Thank you very much. Zoltán, you have the floor. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning and thank you. I think these kind of discussions are really important in these difficult times we are facing. We've seen that all over Europe, somewhere at the end of last summer, started an energy crisis, which was deepened by the war in Ukraine, and we have to face this new situation. We have to find solutions, and of course, the first and the most important solution to this energy crisis, which could offer us long time solution are the investments. And we've seen that in all over Europe, this energy crisis and the war in Ukraine just made it much more firmer the commitment of the European Union to decarbonize the energy sector, and most of the member state has accelerated already this process. They are supporting investment in renewable. They are phasing out coal power plants, and definitely we will have much more room for renewable investments in the future. We see in Romania as well that investors, project developers they have returned in Romania. They want to invest in renewable projects, but not only. So we see some conventional power plants planned as well for the next few years. We already see a fairly large number of new connection requests for new production capacities, which is a good news anyway. The regulatory authority, we are trying to adapt the legislation constantly to the new conditions. We are aware that this market is changing constantly, and there's a different need compared with the first renewable waves in Romania back in between 2020 and 2016. We need much more flexibility in the networks, but we need much more flexibility from the producers as well. Probably storage will be crucial in the next period, and storage basically is a completely new category of market participant. It is a consumer, it is a producer as well in the same time. So we have to address this problem, and we have to adapt the legislation to help those investors who are building power plants, power production capacities combined with storage, or just investors in storage, because that will be as well a new business in the future. We've seen that there's a huge interest for becoming a prosumer in Romania, household and non-household consumers as well. We changed and we adapted the legislation a couple of times during this year, and we see that there's a constant progress in the market. In 2022, there were installed more than 20,000 new production capacities of producers. Our total installed capacity of the producers is close to 300 megawatts, which is not negligible at all. And we see in the future a constant interest for that, and probably in 2023 we will have much more new installations of prosumers installed. Maybe we will have close to 100,000 in 2023. If of course, if all the parties who are involved in this procedure of connecting or building will be involved and will be proactive to help them. We see that the high prices on the energy markets are attracting investors. Basically, there are a lot of investors who are willing to invest without any subsidies, without any grants, but we have grants as well. So there were some calls at the Ministry of Energy based on the resilience plan, and we will have in the future some grants from the modernization fund. So there are a lot of financing possibilities for new production capacities. There is a strong signal coming from the legislative part as well, from the government and from the parliament. Of course, not everyone is pleased with the price capping applied in Romania, but the most important signal in the legislation regarding the price capping is that for new power plants built after 1st of April 2023, none of the mechanism, none of the taxation is applied. So I think it's a strong signal inviting everyone who is interested to invest in Romania. The regulator, me personally, I will always be open for discussion. For further improvement of the secondary legislation, even simplification if it's possible, of course, and our doors will be open anytime for any type of market participant, network operator, investor, producer, consumer, no matter what. And we will try to do our best and to help those who are interested in investing in Romania to do so. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a great day.
Hello, thank you very much, Zoltan, for really very comprehensive speech covering pretty much everything as usual. Hello, can we hear us?
Yes.
So sorry, it was a bad connection. I think we can hear each other right now.
Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to apologize for my connection, and also to thank very much to Zoltan for covering pretty much everything, and also for the openness and willingness to adapt regulations to what the market expects from ANRE, and also aiming for stability, predictability, and noting these achievements up to now, we found out that we have 20,000 new consumers, and all in all having something like almost 300 megawatts, which is good news. And also concern of small consumers to really become as independent as possible during these days, and also storage and grants. Everything was interesting. Thank you very much. And let's go to our next speaker, the president of ANPM, which is Environmental Protection Authority agency, national agency. Sorry. So we have the president with us today. Welcome, and you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation. Unfortunately, our minister, Táncos Barna, could not be here, but I hope that I can bring the necessary input needed into this workshop. To be honest, slightly disappointed that we are not offline, of course, but obviously these discussions are more important than just limit them to these problems. So basically, I'm very glad that I'm here. And when it comes about permitting such systems, wind plants or photovoltaic systems, it's although we at the National Environment Protection Agency, we know that this process can take some time, and obviously I will try to explain a little bit why. We also know that in other European countries, this might be even more complicated than in Romania. However, the importance of these discussions is exactly because of this, because a lot of people and a lot of actors from the different sectors, private sector or even the local authorities, do not understand that sometimes having such a plant or a photovoltaic system, a park or whatever we come up when it comes about renewable energy sources, it might actually have an impact on the environment. And now, obviously, the fact that we have at the ANPM, we have 42 local agencies. This is already a good thing, because any project which needs to be taken, I mean, it needs to be built in a certain region or in a certain county of Romania, doesn't have to come to Bucharest to ANPM for the permitting process, which is already a big advantage. And this also means sometimes that different local agencies have a different approach, and we are emphasizing this a lot internally, and we actually working continuously on how to bring each and every local agency to the same level when it comes about the unitary approach in the permitting process. Now, of course, there's a lot to talk about this, but in a couple of sentences, I think it's very important to understand that depending on the complexity of the project, how big is the project, in what area it will be built. Because of course, if we are talking about Natura 2000 site, then obviously it's a little bit more complicated than expected. But depending on the complexity of the project, the permitting can be done within 2 to 3 months if it's a simplified process, meaning that it's not a Natura 2000 site, and up to probably 6, 7, even a year, 6, 7 months, or even a year, and all depends on the dialogue between the local agency and, of course, whoever is asking for the permits. And I don't even know if I have to go into details, but I think it's sometimes there are, for instance, investors who think that if we put a simple photovoltaic park and maybe we put a fence around, it's a very simple construction site, so it should be very simple. However, what we have to understand that we might have different species which needs to be protected, because the fact that we for instance, we build a fence might actually have a bigger impact on the environment than expected. But all in all, this part of the permitting process goes, I would say, pretty good. And I actually invite you, and I urge everyone who has any problems and any questions about this to come to the National Environment Protection Agency, because we are, just as Zoltán said, we are open and our doors are open, and we are trying to help as much as we can. And here I might actually add the fact that it makes sense to come and visit us and have a discussion even before you actually come with the documents ready, because sometimes very small adjustments to the project can mean a lot of time when it comes about, of course, saving time. Because maybe if the project is I don't know, 5% smaller, or now in quotes 2 meters to the left or to the right can mean a lot of difference, and then of course this means a lot. On the other hand, maybe one or two more things about what else is going on inside the Ministry of Environment, Water and Forests. Of course, we have the Environmental Administration Fund, through which we finance different photovoltaic systems. And as Zoltán mentioned previously, that we have 20,000 systems. Of course, it's good to know that in 2022, basically this year, there were another 45,000 systems applications. It's not yet the system, but the applications. And as far as I understood from AFEME, from the Environmental Administration Fund, by the beginning of next year, so somewhere in February, all these 45,000 applications will be evaluated. At the moment, they are somewhere in the middle of the process, so 25,000, if I'm not mistaken, are evaluated. And of course, the ministry is willing and is actually planning to open another session for household users somewhere in 2023, but in a different system, where most likely the applications will not come centrally to Bucharest, to AFEME, but the local authorities will have the evaluations, which means that if everything is as expected and the plans go as we would like, in the upcoming 2 to 3, 4, maybe 4 years, we will have a lot more photovoltaic systems, prosumers than what we have now. Because if last year we had about 200 million euro invested in this program, so 45,000 systems, roughly 200 million euro. In the upcoming 4 or 5 years, we are talking about another 500 million at least. But at some point we actually discussed even the 1,000 million, so 1 billion euro, 1 billion. Yes, 1 billion euro, actually, this is 5 billion RON, which means roughly another 50 times 100,000 systems. So what Zoltán said about the megawatts and the 100,000 systems in 2023 is indeed coming. Maybe not in 2023, but it's ahead of us. Thank you very much. And any questions you have, I'm here and I gladly answer as far as I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, there are very good news from your side. The fact that basically out of the 45,000 requests from prosumers, by the end of this year, at least half will be given positive answers, hopefully, and the other half will be solved during the next spring. It's a very good news, and we also note your readiness to give a help hand to the ones having delays or troubles in this process. Indeed, thank you very much. It's really good news. We are going forward now. Of course, nothing can be done without having access to the network and also proper functioning of the networks to welcome renewable electricity, and not only so necessary for the next months and years. So we have today the pleasure to have with us High Representative of Transelectrica, Mrs. Daniela Bolborici, who is the Director for the networks over there. Thank you very much for being today with us. You have the floor. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I'm glad to participate and to have the opportunity to learn about this study and about the results of this study. And I hope that all the regulation factors will cooperate to make a better legislation, better regulation. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I can try to answer. Otherwise, I will just assist at your presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Indeed, very efficient speech, but the best news is that the new producers, they have the full support coming from Transelectrica, from you personally, and we really appreciate, because it's I know that you are doing your best efforts to find the quickest way to connect new producers. You are fully aware that that we need additional generation yesterday, let's say, and we can count on you always. Thank you very much for being today with us. We are glad that you will be here with us further on. Thank you to our panelists. And I would like to open the floor for the questions and answers. So anyone would like to step in is welcome to pose the question, and we'll be happily all together try to provide the answers. We receive one question saying about the agro PV, and the question is whether there is any plan to incentivize this sector for renewables. So, if any one of you would like to reply about agro PV, if there is any concern, any action, anything against, whether there are some barriers against this, and also about opportunities maybe. I will start. Okay, please. Just you have the floor.
Just 2 sentences here. So at the Ministry of Environment, we had a lot of discussions about where and how to put photovoltaic panels, and agro PV was not one of them, unfortunately. So we are thinking what to do in cities where we don't have households, but of course we have panels or multiple, and then to use the roof, or we have different programs again through AFEME, where a public building can be, from an energy efficiency point of view, can be renovated, and then also there we have photovoltaic panels. I know that, for instance, the Ministry of Development has through PNRR has a program. Also, ANEPM actually applied to that. But with the agro PV, I think someone from the ministry could help us, because there, as far as I know, there are some limitations and some problems to turn fields which are good for other reasons, also to simply make. And maybe one more thing, I heard, or actually some investors asked us, what about waste deposits which are closed, to reuse that field for photovoltaic panels parks? Here also we have a couple of small problems, because obviously after you close a waste deposit, there are certain membranes and everything which is keeping everything in place. And then if you would like to put fences, or you would like to put systems on which the photovoltaic panels are there, it becomes a problem. So there are a couple of limitations, but yeah, so maybe this is wise to take into account.
Thank you very much for the answer. We'll take another two, and then the remaining one will switch to the end. So Valburga, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to react actually to AgriPV, because you also, I mean, obviously I don't know the exact regulatory frame in Romania, but the opportunities obviously are great, because you're not entering into a discussion around land, and there's a lot of benefits for farmers. So it would really be great if that could be more considered. That's also one of the asks we have, as this is, you know, kind of a no regret option, which can be put in place very fast, and which is not having any detrimental effects. On the contrary, there's financial benefits to farmers. There is also benefits in terms of harvests, which are greater. So from our perspective, this is one of the great opportunities that Versatile Solar holds, and should be much more adopted. And we see a trend, actually. You know, we see more and more AgriPV being taken up. So huge growth in AgriPV, and it would be great to see that in Romania as well.
Thank you very much. Indeed, very useful comments. Indeed, it's something that it should be developed also here. Roxana, please. Roxana Petrescu. Bună dimineața, welcome, please.
Hello. So I have a couple of questions. The first one is related to the storage discussion. When could we have a regulatory framework for the future investments in the storage capacities, and which are the forecasts related to the capacity that could be deployed in the next, let's say, 3 years? That would be one question. And the other question was is related to the presentation made by Mr. Laurent Fulop. He mentioned a total value of investments on the prosumer side in the next 1-2 years. I didn't understood it. I didn't understand it correctly. It's 200 million euros. If he can repeat that, thank you.
Anyone who replies to that?
To the second question, I have an answer. So basically 45,000 systems, when we are talking about 20,000 RON, which is approximately 4,000 euro, means approximately 200 million euro. So basically in 2022, when we accepted those, the ministry, AFM, accepted those 45,000 applications, meant roughly about 200 million, I'm sorry, 200 million euro. Okay. And also a little bit of an answer to a previous question. About 90% of those applications is a yes. So in 2019, when there was a similar program at AFME, and there were in total 25,000, 27,000 applications, about half of those was yes. And now from the 45,000, as it seems up to this moment, when more than 25,000 are evaluated, 90% is yes. And then in the upcoming period, there is a will and there is a plan to put in again 5 times that 200 million euro. So basically, if we had let's say 45,000 applications, then if we give the whole process to the local authorities, right? So not AFME is the one who needs to evaluate each and every project, and of course, as it seems, it will be much more simpler. Then this process will be sped up considerably, because this means that each and every local authority needs to handle a couple of tens of projects instead of one central office to handle thousands of projects.
Thank you very much. Indeed, now we'll switch. I'll take only one question for Transelectrica and last question for you. Quickly, and then we move to the next panel, just not to puzzle the agenda and the timing of our meeting. So the question for Transelectrica is the following: is there a strategy to short the permitting term obtaining the ATR? Now, from the application date up to the issue of the ATR takes sometimes more than 6 months. Do they consider asking deposits from the application date to secure the ATR? This is the question. So, Daniela, if you'd like to respond.
Yes, of course. Well, of course, there are some deadlines mentioned in the regulation about the time, how fast should we move to finalize and issue an ATR. I think the most time takes to make and approve the study, the solution study, maybe because and because there are so many projects, the solution studies are not so easy to be made by the consultants, and also are not easy to be checked by us, by the network operators. And things are getting more and more difficult, and I understand people are very anxious about this, and they want to obtain the ATR as fast as possible. But when there are so many projects, and sometimes they influence each other, so there are situations when several projects could be connected in the same substation, same new substation, and they should cooperate to build together, to finance together this common substation. And this is not the only case. There are many other situations when projects influence each other. There are also many network reinforcements needed. Recently, we tried to find a way to implement also automatic means to limitate the power in some situations. And these are the main reasons, I think, for delaying all this process. It's like, you know, when you go by car through a big city, and there are many cars in the street, so the cars have to go slowly because there is not enough space for all these cars to go fast. So maybe it's the same, it's similar process. Maybe people who want to make such projects for renewables should think about how to schedule these projects in time, because not all the projects can be made in the same time, and not all the projects can be finalized in the next 2 years or 3 or 4 years. And maybe people should think about perspective about next 5 or 10 years. And also the regulation should have this in mind. I mean, the people who make the regulation should have this in mind, and allow these projects to be somehow scheduled in time. Of course, we have targets to integrate renewables for 2025 or 2020 and 2030 and 2030, but everybody wants to finalize in 2025, and this it's not possible for many reasons. So yeah, I don't know what you meant about consider asking deposit from the application date to secure the ATR. Maybe you could clarify this.
I do propose, because it was a question coming from the audience, that all the questions which are on chat will be responded in written after the meeting. So really, I don't know what he was meant or he wanted to say via that, but we'll come back with the questions and answer in a written format. So don't worry. Thank you very much, Daniela. There are many interesting questions on the chat, so we are working on responding all of them. But in order not to delay our conference, I would like to to our dear panelists from the first panel, and to you being very patient and following us and posting the questions, and I will make sure that you will receive the proper answers as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Radu, you have the floor for the next panel, and sorry for the delay. Thank you very much to all of you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to this very timely discussion. Thank you, Adi, for passing the floor. So in the interest of time, I'll try to be as brief as possible and move quickly to our panelists. My name is Radu Dudou. I'm the president of the Energy Policy Group, a think tank on energy and climate policy. We're certainly following closely the renewable energy developments in Romania. We're saluting this obvious wave of interest for renewables, but also criticizing constructively, if I may say, some obstacles and barriers that are still hindering progress. Just the other day, 2 of my colleagues published a paper is out about structural obstacles, but also some very concrete regulatory ones, such as this bizarre interpretation by the Ministry of Agriculture of the permitting law on agricultural land, which I see keeps popping up in the chat box today. Now, I'll because we're having a great panel, and I'm pleased now to turn the microphone to Walburga Hemmetsberger. She's the CEO of Solar Power Europe, the major solar association on the continent, and also a prominent voice. Walburga, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rado. And I have to apologize up front because I need to run in 5 minutes as I have a meeting which I cannot skip. But it's a great pleasure being here today because it's an incredibly important topic, and I'm very happy to give you a little bit of an overview on the figures we're looking at on solar, and also a sneak preview on the project RES Simplify, which we've done together with Wind Europe, and our take on permitting and administrative procedures. I will then hand over to my dear colleague Jonathan Bonadio, who is anyway the expert on permitting, to stay with you for the discussion and answer any questions you might have. I would like to share a couple of slides, and I'm trying to do that right now. Okay, here we go. I hope you see it. Just making it a little bit bigger. Just to show you a little bit the magnitude, and maybe to start with, I was very lucky to be able to participate already and listen to the panel before, because it really shows the complexity of the issue. At the same time, it is also very clear, and also Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and everyone else has really emphasized it many times, that the only way to get us out of the crisis we have, or the multiple crises we have, and the energy crisis in particular, is just go fast on renewables. And apart from that, it also has a deflationary effect. So the economic crisis we're in as well will be impacted positively by just going faster. So there's no doubt that we need to go faster. But anyway, already before the crisis, solar was growing exponentially. So we have today 200 gigawatt of installed capacities. It went very fast, as you can see from the graph here, in order to get there. But we will be growing even faster. This is a graph which is slightly outdated. That was from our report before the crisis. So we've been growing considerably last year already, some 27 gigawatt we added. This year, our medium scenario was around about 35, our high scenario around about 40. We will come up in a couple of days with our latest figures on the European market outlook. And I do think that everyone will be surprised, because we're by far overreaching these targets, and will be beyond 40 gigawatt this year, without already giving you an exact figure. But that means we will be further growing exponentially, and if that is if that is also supported by permitting and all the other regulatory support we need, we are pretty sure that we will be at some 100 gigawatt of installed capacity in the next couple of years, probably 2025, 2026, which will hopefully then get us to this 1 terawatt, which we're aiming at. The Commission wants us to reach 750 gigawatt by 2030, and that means a milestone of 400 gigawatt by 2025. And that means really doubling the installed capacity that we have today, 200 gigawatt, in the next couple of years, in the next 3 years. So more countries are becoming gigawatt markets. Not the least, we expect Romania to become a gigawatt market by 2025. So it's not just a couple of or a handful of markets which are gearing up on solar, but it's more and more markets which become gigawatt markets. Just quickly also reflecting on our forecast for Romania in the next couple of years, where you also see a very steady growth without going into all the details now. And this is the growth path, and that's now slides which are taken from the RES Simplify projects. So a lot of emphasis on solar in Romania for the next couple of years. And indeed, when we then look at the findings of RES Simplify, we see that one major bottleneck is permitting. Administrative authorization, as we call it here in the report, and grid connection permits. So grid connections and permitting of projects are one of the major bottlenecks we're looking at going forward, which again, I know it's a complex issue, but still this is needed. We need to go faster if we want to bring that down. It can still take up to 4 to 5 years to permit new ground-mounted PV projects. The red color indicates that indeed also Romania is one of the countries where it's still too slow. So if we want to tackle these crises, this is the major thing we need to do, as complex as it is, but it is important to go forward. Now, the nice thing, I mentioned it in the previous panel about solar, is that it's very versatile. You know, it's not just ground mounted, but there's some no regret options. The roofs we have, if you look at the roofs in total in Europe, it's some 25% of Europe's current electricity consumption that you could cover by just using, and that's a that's still a very conservative estimate, by using European roofs. Not just roofs, but also integrated PV, which should take up in the next couple of years. So where permits should be given much faster, because there is no question about environmental issues. There's no question about any discussions with land use and double land use. So these are the no regret options, which should just be facilitated much faster. Obviously, there's this question of grids, but we do think that there is some low-hanging fruits as well that could be harvested when it comes to the grid connection. Indeed, just to show that there's a huge difference when we talk about permitting in Europe. There is a huge difference in terms of where the bottlenecks lie. Clearly, what we identified in the project is that most of the bottlenecks are project-related issues, less so conflicting public goods, so when it comes to land and other things. And I just want to, before I'm ending, highlight some of the best practices which have also been identified. I mean, one big support for being faster in permitting obviously is digitalization. So increased use, for example, here in Germany, increased use of e-communication is something which can speed up permitting. Another one is that in many countries it is still necessary to go to different authorities, so a one-stop shop, and having everything together in one application process obviously is also speeding up. Here's an example from Denmark. Then also project development guidance, which is a best practice which has been identified in Italy, where competent authorities have published guidelines that help project developers with the application project. Portugal, a task force on barriers, which is working on those. A database for spatial planning, so that it's clear, and that's one of our key asks, by the way, as well, in the discussions we're having at European level now on speeding up permitting, is that we identify priority areas, so areas where it's just clear that this is ideal land and ideal spaces more generally to develop renewables and develop solar in particular. So to identify these areas so that project promoters can then go very fast and develop projects in those areas which are no regret areas, where there's no problem with environmental deterioration or you name it. And then the last example I just wanted to bring is easier procedures for repowering. That is one of the things we've been pushing for in the emergency measures, which are on the table of the European Council at the moment, because there's a huge potential from old solar plants, which can be repowered very, very fast, because in the end, you know, all the permitting has been going, so these project promoters has been going through permitting already. So there has been studies on this plot of land already. Just to give you one figure, in Germany, and that's also one of the examples I'm bringing here. In Germany, if you would repower old plants, you would add some 10 gigawatt very, very quickly to the market. So this is also an easy way of adding more gigawatts to more renewable gigawatts to our European market. So last slide, indeed big topic at European level now, how to speed up permitting. There has been discussions already ongoing in the European Parliament where a position has been adopted already. We're just waiting for the plenary. And the emergency measures the European Commission has put on the table. So Article 122, only in emergency situations. We've seen that for gas. Now we have it on the table also for renewables to bridge the gap. Basically until the renewables directive with the proposals on speeding up permitting would kick in. So to bridge the gap and already have effects in order to bring down the costs of energy by next winter already, and to have more renewables by next winter already. Just quickly running through the different proposals which are on the table. I'm not touching the green ones because this is where everything's going fine, and where the Parliament and the Council have already adopted some very helpful measures. But what we still need, both in the Parliament and the Council, is really a faster designation of these acceleration areas which have been identified. So to really identify where are the areas where we can go fast without any problems when it comes to the environment and others. We also need a broader application of the silence that should be applied, you know, when a time frame is coming to an end, a permitting time frame, that it's automatically permitted. And we in the Council, we also need to see faster permitting times. But it's generally going in the right direction, but now is the opportunity to really be ambitious and to get rid of those areas, and that's permitting, which is holding us back in order to bring our energy costs down and to stabilize the European continent when it comes to our economy and our energy costs. So that was very, very quickly from my side. I'm again apologizing that I cannot be with you in the ongoing workshop. But Jonathan Bonadio, as I said, I will be very happy to answer any questions and engage with you further on. I wish you a further successful workshop. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Walburga. Very informative presentation. There's already interest. A participant asked if you could share the slides with them.
I'm very happy to.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, and have a good day. All right, now let's move quickly to the wind sector now. Again, Adrian Borota, the Vice President of the Romanian Wind Energy Association, is with us to share the specifics of the wind power sector. Adi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Radu. I'm back again. Sorry for being so long again during the first panel. So I'll try to be more efficient this time. Indeed, we found out from the solars that it's very advanced, and there are many actions in parallel. It's the same in the wind. So there is a boiling period also in Romania, because we are going to talk about Romania this time. As we know, there is a huge need of additional capacity no matter what. and the most promising and quickly to be commissioned are the solar and the wind going all together. And if we look to Transelectrica website, it is confirmed that that this is really happening. If we look to the ATR, then we see more than 3,000 megawatts already approved, and some other 1,000 on the way to be approved at the stage of ATR. And if we talk about the connection contract, then here we have already something like over 5,000 megawatts of new wind being in a pretty much ready to build stage once they have the connection contract already signed. This is a good sign for Romania, for consumers, because as we know, the wind electricity, also the solar, they are putting the pressure on the prices to the end users, which is highly needed during the winter and for the next years. So we do hope that everything will continue as promised. We just aim that the legislation will be stable, will be predictable. We noted many changes this year, some of them ongoing and some others foreseen for the next year. Nevertheless, investors, they trust, they have the confidence, and as it looks following the figures, it is confirmed by them. I don't want to be more talkative this time, but I'm ready to take any question at the end. No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian. Concision highly appreciated. Again, in the interest of time, we'll move quickly to the next panelist. This time, a leader of Romanian Solar Association, and in the interest of transparency, also a colleague of mine at the Energy Policy Group. Mihai Bălan is also a senior researcher with EPG and actually one of the lead authors of the paper I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, being published 2 days ago. So Mihai, please.
Thank you, Radu, for the introduction. I'll try to follow in the steps of Mr. Borota and get straight to the point because we'll have more time to discuss in a later panel. So the thing is, in Romania at the moment, we're constantly switching between making great things and making very bad decisions for the renewable sector. So going over the RES Simplify report, we noticed like when it was published 1 year ago that the situation was quite bad in Romania compared to other countries, especially on the permitting side. And then some things started to change with modifications to the law of energy. So this spring, in 2022, in spring, we could have said that things were going in a good direction. And it was also reflected by a report at European level from Ember, I think, placing Romania in top 2 positions for the shortest permitting times in Europe for both wind and solar, which was great news because actually the average permitting time for Romanian solar PV project was 1.5 years compared to 4 or 5 in other member states. However, trying to make things better, we actually put a halt to everything with the changes to the land use law, which basically created an unexpected and I'd also like to point out artificial blockage coming from the interpretation of this law from the Ministry of Agriculture. Basically, today, every project above 50 hectares, which for a solar PV project translates into 42 something megawatts, is being blocked at the Ministry of Agriculture. We don't know exactly what's the reason for that. We can only speculate that there is this food security versus energy security debate coming into question, but we did the math, and you know, for the most ambitious REPowerEU targets, that's meaning roughly 6,000 megawatts installed in Romania on ground-mounted PV systems by 2030. We would only need roughly 0.05% of the total agricultural land of Romania. And guess what? only 65% of it is actually being used. So we believe it's a totally unnecessary polemic, and we really hope that this barrier will be addressed very soon. It's a simple administrative barrier that basically by removing it, we can unlock the situation in Romania. However, we all know we have a lot of developers here attending this meeting, and we all know that this is not the only problem in the Romanian permitting landscape. And we also have to look at what's happening next. If we get rid of the blockage at the Ministry of Agriculture, is everything all right? Are we going to be one of the leading markets in Europe in terms of developing renewables quickly? Are we getting there fast enough to a gigawatt market as Walburga presented in her slides, or are there any problems to be addressed? And we need a constant dialogue with the stakeholders, with the authorities, with the developers, with the associations, in order to try to make things better. Because the actual question today, when at Brussels level everything is on the table in terms of permitting, and we also have the REPowerEU package, which not only comes with money, but it also comes with the chance to make some very clear and efficient reforms that we have to push for. The main question is, how can we improve without damaging what is already quite positive in Romania? And this is what I'd like to discuss over the next panels or so together here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mihai, for being concise again. It looks like we're managing to make up for some of the initial delay. Now I'm moving to Andrea Panizzo of Enel, head of Europe BD, and I suppose will be explained what BD means in this, but anyway, Andrea, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. BD means business development. So we develop renewable projects all around Europe, all around the world as Enel Green Power. My responsibility is to follow the development in Europe. I tried to connect some dots about what I heard so far. So the intervention of my colleague Mihai Balan was very effective. I fully agree with what you said, Mihai. Let's see what happened in Romania during the last couple of years. Essentially, investors came back to Romania. Why? I think because the permitting is fast if compared to other countries. So one of the best in Europe, maybe in terms of timing. And for sure, because the macroeconomic conditions of the country allowed the attraction of many investors. So it was not a policy-driven development. It was a market-driven development. So today, I connect another dots that I heard. Today, if you watch the website of Transelectrica, there are 17 gigawatt of renewable projects under process for getting a connection. So 17 means much more than expected, much more than the national energy plan. It's a big amount of projects. So investors are there. Because they've been attracted, but of course investors need also stability and also programs. So yes, permitting is fast, but there are still a lot of bottlenecks or gray areas. So there is not a regulation for batteries, for instance. There is not a regulation that allows multiple technologies under the same connection point. I'm talking about hybrid plants, so wind plus BESS, wind plus solar. And also this could boost the development of repowering. So there is still the need to improve and to add something that is missing today in the regulation. So something else that is missing, of course, permitting is fast, but it leaves open some doubts in the investor. So the cadastre is not digitalized, and any investor should then try to recollect all the landowners to make something that I learned from the Romanian development, which is the famous intabulation, something that is not common in other countries, for instance, because there is a little bit of a mess there. So it's true that permitting is fast, but it leaves open something that gives and still, let's say, leaves the investor with some uncertainty. So there are some specific points that need to be addressed. Then in terms of grid, there is a lot to be done. So I'm happy that here there is connected Ms. Daniela Bolborici, which is the head of development in Transelettrica. So when today we receive an ITR, most of the time we are asked to contribute to the network development, so to spend a lot of money to connect, which is something that in a long-term program getting to 2030, essentially, which is the Repower EU and the EU Commission asking to do, let's say there should be a lot of effort on the grid side. So all in all, my message is very simple. So the market drove investors in Romania. Instead of following what the market is doing, now the government and Romania should lead the energy transition, should lead and should surf the wave. Okay, this is my only strong message.
All right, thank you, Andrea. Very useful list of observations, and always enlightening to hear them from an objective standpoint, from a distance, as it were. And indeed, the cadastre is our enduring connection to the Middle Ages in Romania. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. We have one more panelist, Mrs. Paula Corban, local partner at DLA Piper. Paula, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Radu. From a lawyer perspective, so renewables and permitting means regulations. And if we really want to accelerate the deployment of the renewables, both wind and solar, we need a legislative framework that simplifies the administrative burden. It's exactly what we heard from Andrea and what we heard from Mihai earlier. So we need a legislation that is simple, and most important, legislation that is applied consistently across country, but by all the involved stakeholders. Unfortunately, we are not quite there, I will say, although indeed the permitting process has a certain speed in Romania, but we are not quite there. And currently, as far as we see, there are two main issues that are hindering, or let's say delaying, the development of wind and solar projects. One is the fact that the legislation is too complex and has too many pieces of law, which unfortunately are not always correlated among them. And the second one is the fact that the various authorities that are involved in the process are not applying the said legislation in a consistent way. And if we are to take the example that Mihai mentioned, with the legislation on the dual use of land for agriculture and renewables, we see exactly this. We see a piece of legislation that was meant to simplify the permitting process by allowing renewables to be built in extra VLAN, and therefore eliminating the need for a PUZ procedure, which takes time. However, in the construction legislation has not been also changed. And in practice, what we have seen two totally different interpretations. Yeah, some people considered that PUZ is not needed anymore because the land law has changed, while others consider that, you know, a PUZ procedure is still needed because you need to approve the urbanism parameters of that construction in line with the unchanged legislation. And then is the issue of the fact that we have various authorities that are involved in the permitting process. We have local authorities, we have various ministries, we have grid operators, and unfortunately, not all of them have the same resources and the same knowledge and capacity to deal with this kind of projects, which are complex, and they cannot deal with the increase of the number of the application. And as a result, in practice, what we are seeing delays, we are seeing authorities which are not answered, we are seeing, I don't know, missing urbanism certificates or wrong permitting. So if renewables are a real strategic objective for Romania, as we see from politicians every day, the policymakers should put in place a legislation that is simple, is clear, and as Andrea said, should be stable. If we are to learn from past experience and past mistakes, we need to show that Romania has some stability in the legislation around the renewables, because otherwise investors will leave Romania as they did in the past.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. Again, clear stated list of barriers. You sometimes wonder if the lack of uniform practice is just a matter of, you know, lack of knowledge, or if it also leaves room for some corrupt practices, but I don't want to get too much into this. Thank you all the panelists. We've been quick. Now, I think we can take a few questions, ideally no more than 3 or 4 brief questions. So please, from the participants. Well, I see silence, which can also be a good sign.
There are a couple of yellow hands. I see Vrabbi Yon and also Olga Kostrichuk.
I don't see them, but maybe I'm not. But yeah, the thing is, even if I don't see them, you can speak up and introduce yourself. Yeah. Or write them down in the chat box. Ion Vrabie. Yeah, well, I think we'll have to leave it at that because we have another presentation coming. Guy Willems, Wind Europe, he's a strategic communication advisor there, has a presentation is to offer us. And with that, I just want to thank you, to thank all the panelists again for the great and concise discussion. And after Guy's presentation, Mihai will take over moderation. Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'll just start with sharing my screen. 1 second, please. There we go. So first of all, very good that we're all meeting this morning together, and thank you very much to Arwea for organizing the workshop on this very important topic. So my presentation is mostly going to be about the RES Simplify project, which Walburga already introduced during her presentation. But I first wanted to start off setting the scene from the wind energy side of things. So where are we in Europe with wind energy at the moment? We have around 236 gigawatts installed all over Europe, which makes up 15% of Europe's electricity demand at the moment. The highest installed capacity is in Germany with 64 gigawatts, but we see also that, for example, Spain, the United Kingdom have very high shares, very high numbers of gigawatts installed already in their country with 28 gigawatts and 27 gigawatts respectively. When we look at individual countries' share of electricity demand, then we see that Denmark is the highest. They have 44% of their electricity coming from wind energy already. Ireland has 31%, and we see that Portugal and Spain are also pretty high with 26% and 24% respectively. When we look at Romania, there is 3 gigawatt installed already, which makes up around 11% of your electricity consumption. But where are we moving in the future? So I already told you how much we have at the moment. In the EU, this is around 190 gigawatts, but we're waiting for a much bigger increase for the future. So the European Commission wants to have 510 gigawatts of wind energy capacity by 2030. And they actually increased this in the beginning of the year with the Repower EU strategy, when they added another 60 gigawatts of capacity to the ambition. And when we look at 2050, the European Commission wants 1,300 gigawatts of wind energy all over Europe. And you'll see here that the majority of that will have to come from onshore wind with 1,000 gigawatts. But right now we are absolutely not building enough wind energy. So to get from the 190 gigawatts that we have right now to the 510 gigawatts that the European Commission wants, we would have to build 39 gigawatts each year. Now, for your perspective, last year we only built 11 gigawatts within the EU. And we at Wind Europe expect that in the next 4 years, we will only build 18 gigawatts each year, which is not even half of what we would need to build to actually reach the target that the European Commission wants. And then the main problem here is permitting in many member states. The picture that you can see here is from a German project. This is, I believe, a wind farm with only 5 turbines, and this is all the paperwork that goes into it. And this is an issue in many member states. So you can imagine.
Just to tell you.
Sorry?
It's my picture. I gave to Giles this picture.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you, Andrea, for that. We use it a lot.
Yeah, I know this.
So, I mean, you can only imagine how much work this takes, how much in printing cost this takes. So this is an issue in many member states, as I said. Now, the EU is trying to accelerate permitting in member states already. And right now they're actually proposing some emergency measures also after Repower EU and after the energy crisis that's going on right now, in which they want to declare the expansion of renewables as an overriding public interest. They want to apply a population approach to species during the environmental impact assessment, and they want all permits to be handed out in 2 years. Now, this was already part of the Renewable Energy Directive, but in practice, it wasn't really applied by many member states effectively. And the European Commission now wants this to become normal practice. So I'd say approximately in the middle of last year, Wind Europe, Solar Power Europe, the Öko Institute, and Eclairion set up this RES Simplify project in name of the Commission. And what were we trying to do with this project? We were trying to research, analyze, and set the benchmark for the permitting situation in each member state of the European Union. In that, we identified policy recommendations and best practices that can be applied across all member states as well. And right now we are in the stage of disseminating the results. So hopefully they will be applied at national level as well. Walburga just shared a similar graph, I think. This is the result of the permitting barriers across the whole EU, which doesn't really give the most positive image. The purple blocks concern severe barriers and the red ones moderate barriers, and you see that they're quite common. The yellow ones are minor barriers and the green ones are no barriers, which we would like to see much more of course, and we don't see so many green barriers, no barriers, sorry, in most member states. Now in Romania, I'm happy to hear that the process is relatively quick here, but that doesn't mean that there are no barriers. There very clearly are some barriers. In a second, I'll go through the individual steps as well. But basically, as a small summary, so for site selection, the research showed almost no barriers. There are some for electricity production license. There are significant barriers in the administrative authorization process, and during the grid connection permit, there are also some barriers. The other sectors here were deemed not relevant for Romania, so we don't have a judgment on those. As for Romania individually, where are you right now? I think we're all aware that you had a peak of renewable energy installation in 2013, sorry, and after that it went down, and we saw a significant decrease in installations. I saw recently that you actually have some new wind projects coming up in the next couple of years, so I hope we're really moving towards that direction. What does Romania envision in its national energy and climate plan? So what do they want to build by 2030? They want to have approximately 2.5 gigawatts extra of wind energy and 3.5 gigawatts of solar energy. I'm happy to hear that there is much more in the pipeline already. And of course, the national energy and climate plans will have to be updated next year to reflect the higher targets that the European Commission has set themselves. So all member states will have to come up with higher targets for build out of renewables. Now, as I said before, I'm happy to hear that the process in Romania for getting a permit is one of the quickest in Europe, but that doesn't mean that there are no barriers. I want to go quickly with you through the barriers that the RES Simplify project identified in Romania. I know most of you will be very much aware of these barriers and of the actual details of what these processes actually encompass. So I want to go through them quickly and then focus on how you can actually improve the situation, which I think is much more important. So what does it take to get the administrative authorization for a renewable energy project in Romania? There are quite many different steps, which involve quite a lot of different authorities. I just put the most common ones here. Of course, in some cases, developers may require additional certificates or permits from different authorities. So let's start with the barriers in Romania. I said before, the site selection part is okay. The electricity production license has minor barriers. The administrative authorization is where the real problem lies, especially for onshore wind, but also for PV rooftop and ground-mounted PV. And the grid connection permit is similar to that one. So let's start at the start, the site selection. Although the study didn't identify major barriers in the site selection, doesn't mean that nothing goes wrong there. So although this is more of an informal part of the whole process, this also creates uncertainty regarding general and local urban plans. The legal status of these plans may be different locally, or there may simply be a different interpretation of what these plans mean at a local level. And they can differ between different municipalities, which makes it difficult for developers to come to a place, to do their site selection, and to have the legal certainty that what they propose is actually going to be valid afterwards. What developers also mentioned during the studies is that there is a lack of transparency from the authorities, which is related to the points I was just making, but also that even when they're asking for clarification on certain issues, they receive no answer within the time limit, or they receive no answer at all. This could potentially be because of the lack of projects that we saw in Romania in the past 5 years. So some local or many local authorities simply do not have the experience of working with renewable energy projects. So they don't know how to deal with this situation. Then the electricity production license. So UNRWA is legally mandated in Romania to offer a written response to each application in a maximum period of 30 calendar days. In practice, this can be much longer. So developers really do not receive a response within these 30 days, and instead it can take months for them to receive a reply. Now, a part of the reason for this could be that there's no centralized IT portal where all the files can be entered. Of course, an IT portal makes it much easier to communicate than to do everything by paper. And that simply doesn't exist right now. And again, here, what the study saw is that there's a lack of transparency and a lack of communication between different authorities. So developers just don't receive answers in time. They don't receive clear answers. And the different authorities just might say different things from each other. Then this is, like I said before, where the real issue lies, the administrative authorization. And part of this is because there are many different permits that you will need in this process. So the urbanism certificate, the building permit, the environmental impact assessment, and certificates from the aeronautical authorities and others like the communication authorities. So there's lots of actors that are working on the permits at the same time during this process. Now, this also makes it a very complex procedure. And for many of these permits, there is no clear timeline. So developers don't know how long it's going to take before they get their permit from many of these authorities. At the same time, the process can take much longer because some of these authorities will require papers from one of the other authorities. So developers will have to wait until they get a reply, which they don't know when they're going to receive, basically. So that's also part of the lack of transparency from authorities that we see, and a lack of communication by authorities on when they're going to give these permits, when they're going to give the documents that developers need, that they might need for one of these other processes. Then in this sense, there are also problems with the general and the urban plans, and a different interpretation of laws in different municipalities. It's something I mentioned before already. So maybe in one municipality, a developer can do certain things that in others it cannot do, while of course they have to follow the same legislation. And again, here in these different authorities, their developers said there was a lack of experience in working with renewables because of the lack of projects over the past years. Now, I have to say, we did these interviews in 2020, so I'm happy to hear that people said there's lots of projects, at least in the pipeline. So, at least the experience of people within these authorities can improve quickly. Then the grid connection permit. These are issued by either by the TSO or by the DSO, depending on how big the project is, how big the renewable project is. And again, here we saw that there was a lack of experience in working with renewables. And in some areas of Romania, there is congestion in the grid. And they were actually identified as the most important areas for renewables in your country. So the grid connection authorities were not able to provide permits simply because there's congestion in the network. And on top of that, there is also the prohibitive tariffs that were introduced. So the money that developers have to pay to connect their project to the grid, which of course makes it less attractive to develop a project there. And here the project also identified a good thing though, compared to other countries. In Romania, there is a good collaboration between project developers and grid operators. They're mostly already in touch with each other during the process. So when issues arise, we actually saw that the issues get resolved relatively quickly. So in this area, there's also good things to be mentioned. Now, there are some issues that I mentioned during multiple steps, and they come back in all 4 of the areas that we identified in Romania. So that's a lack of transparency by public authorities. So they don't give updates while the permits are being processed. When developers ask for additional information, they will not necessarily get that information, even though they require that information to be shared with other authorities at the same time. This also goes together with this lack of unified approach at national level regarding permits. There can be an inconsistent authorization process depending on the region, depending on the location, but also depending on the authority that you're dealing with. There's a lack of digitalization for many of these authorities, not all of them, as I mentioned before. There can be a lack of clarity and coordination between different authorities. And I also mentioned it a couple of times already that there can be a lack of knowledge on how to deal with renewable energy projects in many of these authorities because of the lack of projects that you had over the past 5 years. But there's also some additional issues. They've already been mentioned during the discussions before. So there is the law 18/1991, which limits the area that can be used for renewable energy projects to 50 hectares and applies this restrictive regimes of pastures. This also goes together with the difficulty of changing the status of land from agricultural use to urban use. And of course, on agricultural land, developers will not necessarily be allowed to construct any renewable energy project. There can also still be issues with the time limits. So when getting authorization to build a renewable energy project, for example, you can take 18 months for the technical approval to get a grid connection, but you need to do this within 12 months from signing the connection contract. So there's some legal issues there that also make it more difficult to develop a project. And then the recent changes to the tax code, which eliminate the maximum amount of tax and changes the tax on non-residential buildings, also made it more difficult to develop new projects. Now, we've had all the negative ones. Walburga already gave you a preview into this as well. So the project also worked hard to identify good practices from around Europe that could also be very valuable for Romania, which could be applied by developers and by authorities. So I want to start off with the administrative communication and processes. So in Germany, which I showed you the picture from before. 8 regional authorities have actually started fully digitalizing the permitting process, so that you avoid the pictures that I showed you earlier. Well, in Germany, it's a particular issue, but I told you before that in Romania, there's also a lack of IT portals. So, I mean, this simply increases transparency, it accelerates communication between different authorities, and it just accelerates processes. Another good example in this area comes from Denmark, and this is for offshore wind. I know that in Romania, we're also thinking about starting to build offshore wind. What they did in Denmark is the Danish Energy Authority deals with all the permits for their offshore development. So a developer only needs to go to the Danish Energy Authority and hand them all the relevant information. And this authority will deal with everything, so that a developer doesn't have to go to 10 different authorities to deal with one permit application. So one-stop shop, as we call it, is a very positive thing applied in some countries already. So in some countries, governments also apply guidances. So in Italy, in some regions, the regional governments made guidance documents for developers, which outline exactly what the process is, who they need to reach out to, and what kind of documents they need to hand over to apply to get a permit. So this very clearly will accelerate processes, and it increases transparency for developers and for public instances as well. In Portugal, the National Renewable Energy Association set up a task force on barriers, which aimed to tackle barriers and speed up permitting. And they handed over these results both to the government and to developers. So permitting actually sped up because of that. And in Spain, they also made a federal report on the status of renewables. So the national government actually made a similar document that I just spoke about in Italy. So there are concrete steps outlined in what it takes to build individual projects. Now, these ones are a bit related to the previous one. So it's central provision of information. This is more related to the siting. In Spain, they also made a database in which they outlined which areas are suitable for the development of renewable energy projects and which ones aren't. So there's basically a difference between areas which are protected, such as Natura 2000 areas, where you cannot build or where there's extra limits to building, and places where it will be easier to build your project. So this is also good for decreasing delays and increasing transparency on suitable sites. Germany did a similar thing for their offshore wind farms. The National Marine Authority did the same here. They just made a zoning plan for offshore development, in which they basically outlined which areas will be suitable for the development of offshore wind and which ones won't be. So for developers, it's immediately clear where they can start developing, which reduces delays, and there's more clarity on where developers can develop. Another important issue always is the support of locals and the support of local authorities. In Denmark, they introduced some new legislation about 2 years ago, which was aimed at increasing the acceptance of wind energy projects. So there, people who live within a certain radius of a wind farm get financial compensation based on the power of the wind farm in megawatts. And also if there is a loss of value of the property of more than 1%, the project developer has to compensate the owners of that property. So, this should lead to fewer projects being taken to court. In Luxembourg, they took a bit of a different approach. They went for support for municipalities directly. So municipalities that want to have a renewable energy project on their territory get a subsidy. This has the additional benefit of municipalities being more positive to having a project on their territory. And so there is an increase in availability of sites, but also because extra money is available for these local municipalities, we see that acceptance rises. In the Netherlands, we see a similar thing, but here locals have to be included in the development of the project by offering them a 50% share in the project. They don't have to the developer has to offer it. In the end, they're not, the share of participation can actually be lower than 50% if people don't want to participate. But it's already good to reach out to locals to make sure that they're aware of the economic benefit that wind energy and solar energy can bring to their local community. In the Netherlands, they also set up a code of conduct for actually the National Solar Power Association did this. And the code of good conduct basically outlined how developers need to communicate with locals, how to develop the project, and what is necessary. I know that in Romania, the Romanian Wind Energy Association has already developed a similar document, but of course it's important that these documents are also used and actually applied in reality. Then I think they can be very powerful. In France, many developers make sure that during the development of the project, they are in touch a lot with the community. So they're always communicating with them. They're making sure that everyone's up to date about what's going on with the project, and that also increases acceptance and reduces the risk of delay by people taking the project to court. And in Poland, they've actually introduced a new measure where if there still is disagreement about a project, they want to sort that project outside of the court so that the court settlement doesn't delay the process much more than it has to. So there's also other things. I think in Romania, it will also become a problem at some point that projects will need to be repowered. Don't think it's the biggest issue at the moment yet. But in Germany, they introduce easier procedures for repowering wind farms. Of course, there's already a wind farm in place there. If it needs to be repowered, it doesn't need to go through the same complete permitting process as it has done before, because some of the factors will not have changed. So they want to accelerate the process like that. And in Austria, they have an exemption of for people to get an electricity generation license for developers of small hydro plants. Small scale renewable energy projects will be built quicker, basically. And in Slovenia, they did a similar thing where they sped up the permitting process for communities that want to generate electricity by themselves. So for energy communities, they will be able to go through the process quicker because the process the project is basically a grassroots movement. What they've also been doing in multiple European countries, and what I also mentioned earlier that the European Commission wants us to do, is to declare, to have a clarified priority for renewables. So in Germany, what they're doing right now is the regions are responsible there for for how much wind is going to be built and solar is going to be built. And the regions now have to report to the national authority on how much they've actually built of that. If they don't manage to build the amount that the national government wants them to build, they have to provide reasons for why that happened. And in Finland, this clarified priority manifests itself in that the national authorities that deal with permitting have to communicate with each other. So the national construction and environmental authorities networks, for example, work together a lot, which also increases their expertise and simply speeds up projects because they're much better equipped to analyze the permit application. And in Germany, they have also declared renewable energy as a public interest. So in many cases, when there is a conflict of interest, the renewable energy project will receive priority over the other project that they want to develop. Now, I want to end my presentation. So we've had a lot of good examples. I'm happy to share the full report with all of you because there's much more details in there, and there's also much more or many more good practice examples in there. So I think it will be valuable for everyone to have the actual report. And I'd like to highlight that even though Romania still has these barriers that we were discussing earlier, with these good practice examples, I'm sure you can resolve quite many of them, and you'll be moving in the right direction, and we'll see improvements and more renewable energy projects being built in your country in the future. And that's the end of my presentation. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you very much. We're making the shift to the next panel where you will continue to be present with us to further discuss on the findings of this report, but also on the experience that you've also gathered, with in Europe, talking to other members from other countries, see the good practices, what can be done better in Romania. But first, let me just introduce our new our last panel of the day, because along with Guy, we are also joined by Florin from DLA Piper with a lot of insight on what's really happening in the Romanian market, in the entire permitting process. And we've had a lot of discussions up until this moment. We've seen the high-level problem. We've also delved into the details of the challenges that developers are actually facing these days in Romania. And I'd actually propose for this last panel to get, to discuss even further the challenges that we're facing. And we all know, the big elephant in the room, the land use law 254, and we've discussed this. We've over-discussed it, and we still haven't found a real solution for this challenge that we have at the moment. But I'm pretty confident that together we will get this removed. And then what will happen next? Will everything be, like a rose garden, or are we going to head into another wall and another wall? I mean, should we actually adapt to this new reality that the permitting process is somehow a problem-solving process, and it's the job of project developers together with other stakeholders in the industry to always challenge issues that might come from one side or another, from the politicians or from the local communities or from the current context. Can we have a discussion on this? But first, Florin, can you give us an insight, on the overall challenges that we have today in the Romanian process, and then we'll follow up on this.
Yes, thank you, Mihai. Good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here. So it was it is a bit strange to see that Romania has one of the fastest permitting timelines. So between 1 and 2 years, roughly, we could say that you would end up with having a building permit. But in the same time, as Guy very well mentioned in the report, the administrative authorization barriers are one of the highest. So what's up with this? From what we've seen in the past and throughout the projects, the main problems, just to summarize it as a principle, to take a step back and look at the overall picture, the procedures are quite bureaucratic and rigid. And I will explain why this is the case. The lack of consistency, the lack of implementation, it somehow results from how the system works in Romania. So in administrative, in public institutions, the clerks are not allowed to be creative. So are not allowed to help outside the clear rules, the developers in the permitting process, because they could end up being sanctioned, or they could end up being considered as breaching the law. So at the end of the day, all these problems, all these bottlenecks that come in practice are not necessarily a problem of the institution themselves, but maybe they are a problem of the legal framework itself, because the legal framework, as I mentioned, is very bureaucratic and rigid, and sometimes it doubles the permitting process. And just to go back to the land law, which you mentioned, the intention was quite well, but as per the saying that the way to hell is paved with good intentions, this is exactly the case in Romania right now. Because the purpose of the law was to remove the need of a PUZ and to facilitate, to speed up the process of permitting process, but it ended up just with imposing the artificial 50 hectares request, which it's very strange because it's a false problem, because as the land allocated to renewable energy is quite small, as the speakers before me mentioned. And this type of large projects are suitable only for extra-VLAN land, for outer city limits land. So basically, at this moment, what happened with the change in law was exactly the opposite of what should have happened. And from my point of view, legally speaking, the solution is to remove a request of urbanism documentation of a PUZ, for projects built outside city limits. And there are reasonable arguments in this respect. Of course, one might say you cannot disregard other interests of the state, like the interest in agriculture, interest in safety in construction, interest in urbanism, and to prioritize the renewable energy. And my response would be, this is false. The state should decide what they prioritize. Given the current circumstances with the war in Ukraine and the crisis energy, from my point of view as a citizen, it's obvious that we need a lot of focus and allocate a lot of resources in renewable energy, in gaining our independence as a country. And secondly, facilitating, speeding up this process, removing a zonal plan, urbanism documentation outside city limits does not mean to decrease standards, does not mean that you will allow to build everything everywhere with no rules. Because at the end of the day, every project needs to be scrutinized by all these authorities. So you have the permitting process for the building permit, where you go to the Ministry of Defense, to the Aeronautical Authority, to all these authorities, to the environment authorities. So why should we have two procedures, one for the PUZ and one for the building permit, with the same endorsements and same process, which only doubles the bureaucratic burden, and also sometimes delays, as Guy mentioned in the presentation. Authorities do not respond quite well. They condition the responses from the other authorities. So you end up with an artificial barrier, which is absolutely not needed, because you would have the permitting process, the construction parameters and the construction details can be set up by way of secondary legal provisions. For example, we have the ANRE norms. They set up quite clearly the conditions for building a solar project or a wind project. You can start from there, you can upgrade those and have a set of rules that apply in the permitting process for the building permit. So with this simple solution, you reduce by more than half the permitting process, the bureaucratic process, and the overall burden in these administrative barriers. And this is just with regards to this land law change. Another aspect, I will move to the next topic, which could be improved, which would be to give more flexibility in this process. For the moment, the process starts either for the PUZ or for the building permit with the urbanism certificate, and then somehow you are bound by the framework of that urbanism certificate. Quite often, it happens that after you get this urbanism certificate, the Ministry of Defense tells you you need to move your turbine 1 kilometer to the left or to the right. The Aeronautical Authority again asks to make changes. So what do you do then? Because the plots of land are not comprising the urbanism certificate, or even worse, they are not comprising your PUZ, and you're in the permitting process. What do you do then? Authorities in practice try to help. So I've seen supplements, annexes to the urbanism certificate to supplement the initial provisions, but somehow this is based on interpretation of law. And as I mentioned, the clerks in the authorities are not and should not be very creative and should observe clear rules. So at this moment, the second topic that should be considered is for sure to make this process more flexible, to have a clear procedure that would allow you to change the urbanism certificate in the permitting process. Once you get the building permit, it's a bit easier because you have this regulation that allows you to change the theme, the change of theme, modificare de temă, or you can even do some changes by site orders, dispoziție de șantier. So there is more flexibility after you get the building permit than throughout the permitting process. And this is necessary because it's impossible to foresee at the day of the urbanism certificate all the issues that may arise in process, all the issues that may arise, that may be raised by various authorities. And for example, if you have this flexibility to adapt your project throughout the permitting process, of course, you can reconfirm the endorsements. You can have a sort of a challenge. So we are not talking about not having any standards, but to simplify the process of checking a project and its changes. So once you have this flexibility, you can easily adapt your project to the authority's request. So it's a win-win situation. And if a PUZ would not be required, a huge risk would be removed, because you would be able to simply adapt the documentation, reconfirm it with the authorities, and move on with the permitting process. So at the moment, the main problems in practice is this PUZ request and lack of flexibility in the permitting process, which lead basically to this bureaucratic process and to this rigid process, which lead to the increase of administrative bottlenecks that are presented across the sector. There are, of course, other topics that can be discussed, and for example, the agrovoltaic. It was discussed again, but I would mention that agrovoltaic, in case of pastures, for example, it's actually a win-win on all areas, because the solar panels not only allow the pasture on the land, but also provide shadow and protect the grass and also the animals. So this is really a very good solution, helping everybody. But in Romania, you have an obligation to recover the land which you use for this project, to recover from non-productive land. Again, this is okay, a request that we need to have the same surface of pastures, but the burden, the whole administrative burden is moved to investors. Here, the state could do much more. They could help, they could take this process, they could perform the recovery process, of course, at the cost of the developer. So this is also an area which could be improved. And it was mentioned, I think, by Andrea before, also the problem of cadastre and the way to secure the land for the project. What we've seen, basically the land for the main construction usually is quite straightforward. You get a superficie, you get the concession right. So this is quite straightforward and not complicated. This is more or less on the developers, which know very well what to do. The problem appears in the cable route, where you have to pass through very long distances. And there, again, there is no integration between the regulatory approval of the project with the construction permitting of the project. We have the legal servitudes under some conditions under the energy law, but there could be some integration. So I don't know, based on the solution study, to have those servitudes acknowledged. So you know that when you have an approved solution study, you have the servitude rights to pass over the land, because these servitudes already exist. So it's just a matter of helping the developers to use them properly in a faster and swifter manner. Pretty much those would be the main points which I've seen in practice that are causing delays. It's as it was mentioned earlier, it's not all negative. We've seen that the authorities have their door open, so we managed to communicate quite well with the authorities, but there is this rigid approach which is understandable. So that's why we will need to see a clear, simple framework that can be applied in the same manner by the public authorities.
Thank you, Florin. If I may follow up a bit about this rigidity that we're seeing from the local authorities or central authorities, might it be a governance issue? I mean, Romania, at least on a declarative level, supports this transition, but then when they come back from Brussels, they say, yeah, maybe we should do it at a lower pace. And this is basically the main message that gets to everybody, from the population to the local clerks that are in charge of these procedures. And then, what do they understand? Do they understand that the state wants to move in this direction and develop renewables at an accelerated pace, or do they understand that, yeah, things are in the middle and we're not supposed, to accelerate it in any way? Maybe we should need some very clear directions from the highest level in this country to align, to have a coherent strategic and governance approach, to this entire situation in which we need to install renewables quickly in order to ensure our energy security and put pressure on the prices. And this has to be backed up by a short and efficient permitting time. Because from what I understand from your intervention, then there are a lot of overlapping procedures. So basically going through parallel procedures that require the same things. This can be, with a very clear approach, it can be avoided and really get to that shortest permitting time in Europe, as some studies position us, right? I'd also like to open the floor to basically everybody that is attending and have like an open discussion now that we've heard a lot of interventions. We have a clear image. We just want to hear your voice and see how we can address some of these challenges together.
Mihai, just to respond, sure. For sure, this is an area that can be improved, the state leadership at central level. The lack of experience for the local authorities, it's obvious, because it's a new wave, and the people who are now in city halls, probably some of them were not involved in the first wave. And anyways, it's a bit different, the legislation. So what happens, this lack of consistency, I've seen it across counties. So from a county to another, not from a city or a locality to another within the same county. And why is that? Because every city hall in a county looks for guidance to the county council architect, so to the county level. That's why we don't have the same practice in Galați with the same practice in Bihor or Satu Mare. It's the guidance at this moment, at least for the construction permitting area, is given at county levels. And here it would be really great to move upwards to the government level, so that we manage to build a unified practice and consistency across whole Romania.
Yes, indeed, because it seems like we're trying to develop a huge number of gigawatts for the upcoming at least 30 years, you know, because we really need to reach that net zero, and that means hundreds of, well, dozens of gigawatts of renewables investments. But we're trying to do this using a legal and administrative framework that wasn't designed to work for this. So maybe we together, you know, we can unite our forces and benefit from this REPowerEU, new REPowerEU chapter, and everything that's happening in Brussels in terms of shortening permitting times, to actually create some new rules that might be suitable for the upcoming decades, because we're not talking about a new wave. We're talking about a consistent stream of investments that have to come in Romania over the next decades or so. So maybe we should also have like a proactive approach, insist with the authorities that together we can actually work on new rules, you know, not just modifying here and there the existing rules. Guy, is there anything or something that we can actually learn from other European member states in terms of addressing these challenges?
Yeah, I actually I wanted to step in already, because I had some points to make. As to the issues we were just talking about, it's what I also was talking about during my own presentation. There are just so many authorities that are included in the process, and Florin, you mentioned a bit more flexibility would not hurt in this situation. I think it's both flexibility but also cooperation between these authorities, which doesn't happen. And I want to stress again that the best situation really is just a one-stop shop, where you just have one authority, or maybe, you know, at least a decrease of what you have right now. There really are a lot of different authorities you need to address to get that permit. We see the same in different European countries. Regarding the other point that you were making, that yes, there is this demand from Brussels that we build more renewables, but the message does not necessarily arrive where it is needed. So in those local councils that need to give those permits, so they just don't hand out the permits. But I personally see it also as an opportunity for developers to be in touch with them, because developers can bring so much to these local communities. You saw it in I cannot think of the name right now, but you're the biggest wind farm that you have in Romania, and how much improvements that brought to the local community. So there's also a chance for developers to say, okay, we have this project for you, but you're also you don't just have to give us that paper, but when we are able to develop it here, you're actually all going to benefit from having this around you. So it's a bit of a two-sided thing. So you need to, of course, improve the public process, but developers can also use this opportunity. And there was a third point I wanted to make about Florin's earlier point on agriculture that's been coming back a lot of times. For solar, but especially for wind, you know, you can combine wind with agriculture very easily. You have the full field still available, and this happens everywhere in Europe. So I find it I don't understand why the situation in Romania is so complicated regarding that. I don't know how big your agricultural sector is, but I'm sure that in Romania, the development of renewable energy and agriculture can be combined. It happens everywhere in Europe, and it can also be done in Romania.
Thank you, Guy. I'd actually like to touch upon a point, related to communities. There's this survey published in spring, I think, by YouGov, and it was placing Romanians among, the most progressive among 10 or 12 European countries when it comes to support for renewables. So basically, more than 90% of the Romanians would have wanted the solar PV on their rooftops or to live near a wind farm. And this basically means that there is no NIMBY in Romania, no, not in my backyard, which is a great foundation to build upon a new renewable sector. And it also shows us, putting in contrast, the will of the Romanians compared to the, political indecision or the lack of clear governance, that their voice is not really represented by the politicians in this aspect. And it's something that the industry also has to take into account in the upcoming years. About the one-stop shop, I'm actually quite concerned. I mean, one-stop shop sounds great in practice, but maybe Romania has, at least in theory, a short permitting time. And it's not a popular opinion. It's exactly because it doesn't have a one-stop shop. So I'm coming back to my question: how can we improve without, damaging the existing positive sides? I mean, a one-stop shop. Indeed, we have to think very carefully about it and try to see if, if it's really a good solution for, to shorten, from 1.5 years to maybe 1 year or 6 months. Mm-hmm. And I insist on actually giving the floor to our attendees here as well, because it's their experience. They have the boots on the ground when it comes to this. Feel free to intervene directly or write in chat your experience or your questions. Let's try to have an open dialogue here. Yes, we have one raised hand. Go ahead. Florian.
Hi, Mihai. Hello.
Hi, Florian.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about the one-stop shop and about the local communities. I just, of course, can only talk about our personal experience that we have. We never had any problem with local authorities, to be honest, because, if you are a developer who engages with the local community and the local administration, you can explain things. And we had almost exclusively having support there. So I don't see this as a big obstacle. Of course, it's an obstacle that there is a certain redundancy, in the permitting procedure, because you go to the zoning and you go to the building permit procedure, which basically requires the feedback from the same authorities. I think that's something that's redundant. But engaging with the local authorities, particularly on the municipal level, is never a problem. Further, I would say, these procedures also, one could argue, they do not fit to renewables. These are procedures that are well known. This like applying for a building permit, applying for rezoning of a land is a procedure that's practiced for decades. So people know what to expect. Of course, there's particularities to a renewable project, but and I'm very much afraid, if we're having this discussion about the one-stop shop, if I would imagine that there is a new authority responsible for this on a centralized level, this authority would have to invent completely new procedures. Nobody would know how to apply these procedures. There would be a lot of discussion this would, setting up this authority and then getting it going, this would take probably years rather than months. And then so I think that in the Romanian context, we really should try to use the procedures that are already working, streamlining them, avoiding redundancies. I'm talking particularly when we talk about solar, about the zoning issue that could be much quicker. And yeah, I'm very much afraid of a centralized approach to this because we know from experience how unadept the authorities are to this with the overload of applications. If you look at how they proceed, like the subsidy applications under the PNRR tender, or if you look at Transelectrica, I think it's probably not the right approach. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Florian, for this insight. I mean, indeed, we're all concerned about how one-stop shop would function. We're not saying it's not a good idea or that it's a bad idea. I mean, it might have to go hand in hand with a procedure for silent or tacit approval for some procedure, because otherwise you have no control. Once you put in the documents at the one-stop shop authority, you basically lose all control on the process, and you cannot have parallel streams. So it is indeed a discussion that has to be had in the associations, and also learn, from other countries, and try to have a constant and constructive dialogue with the authorities on, because there's actually a legal framework, a higher level legal framework that we have to follow. Jonathan, I see you raising your hand. Go ahead, please.
Thanks indeed. No, I think this is a very interesting debate about should we centralize, should we streamline the existing process. I don't know if you already tackled this topic in these discussions, but I think there is quite an elephant in the room here, which is staffing and skilling of local authorities and national authorities. I mean, we will have to multiply by 5 the amount of solar PV we install by 2030. For wind, we will also go above 1 terawatt of wind from the implementation of GE. I mean, the increase of staff should be commensurate with this increase in capacity. And I think that no matter how ingenious, no matter how imaginative we are to streamline processes, this staffing capacity needs to come as well. And we have seen with high interest the proposal from the parliament, from the MV and INTRE committees to actually allocate sufficient staffing and skilling to local and national authorities. And this would be also a core element in the future. And I would be happy to hear from your side also if there are any plans at national levels to just reinforce and give sufficient training to the upcoming staff for the energy transition as well. So just a remark that I was putting here, but I believe this is important.
It is indeed very important. And what I can tell you, because we, whenever we hear about, adding staff to, the administration side at Romanian level, we say, no, the state doesn't need more people because they will, put pressure on the budget. But this really cannot be done without additional staff on that side. I mean, it's important to make it clear and find a way to make it work and explain it also. It's our role of the association to explain it to the society, to improve the public perception of consolidating the staffing that's needed on the state side, because they're essential for unlocking this process, to be honest.
No, it's definitely something that plays in more countries as well. You see that there's just not enough staff. There's not enough educated staff. So, I mean, in my opinion, yes, definitely. When I see the results of our study, at least there would be a requirement, at least for some more education on the permitting process, but maybe also an increase in staff, like you mentioned before.
I fully agreed. What we've seen also, it's necessary an increase in staff, but actually it's need an increase in educated staff, which is trained and can be helpful.
But can we do, or should we also do our part from the industry side here? Because, you know, they need to be trained basically depending on the demands that come from this sector. So we should be actually open to collaborate here. I see we have another raised hand. Yes, Florin, you wanted to say something? And
just
then
on this collaboration, what we've seen it works in several cases, it worked quite well. So the education is both ways. They explain their position, we explain our position, we provide legal arguments, and usually we have written correspondence. So they also are being educated at their job, and somehow in some cases where we have clear legislation, they accept the point of view. So I think this is a very useful exercise to communicate with the authorities, to tell them your point of view in writing with the legal arguments. Because I haven't seen, or very, very little bad faith to say it. Usually clerks are trying to help, they're open to help, but they need to have a clear regulation based on which they act. And this is our part, to explain them in some cases what is that regulation and what is the behavior they can do based on that regulation.
Thank you. Indeed, actually, before giving the floor to Ilinca, I must say that this year we saw a great initiative from the Competition Council specifically on shortening and making the permitting process more efficient. So indeed, there's a lot of good faith in the authorities, and we just have to make it work. Ilinca, please go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to add one point related to the staff and their knowledge on the subject. Regarding the local authorities, mainly the city hall, there are usually one or two persons that deal with some kind of projects. Usually at a local level, at the administrative territorial level, there are not so many projects, so they can be focused on them and really discussed with the developers and see how they can address difficult issues, or some kind of local specific urbanism rules. But the problems arise when you go up with the authorities at county level and then at national level, because they are overcrowded with projects and they don't have time to really focus on them. And there should be this is the level at which the staff should be increased and even educated to be able to deal with more complex projects. Because at local level, you mostly have to deal with the urban and certificated building permit and the PUZ if they require it. But at other levels, they would need more important permits like the grid connection permit or the endorsement to change the land, the agricultural land, as we see with the recent Ministry of Agriculture problem with 50 hectares threshold. So there should be the focus on educating the staff and really have a unitary approach to some pieces of legislation.
Thank you very much for this input. I'm actually thinking about, that not all, but some of the problems or issues we're facing in the permitting process are also being faced by the TSO and also the DSOs. And, we're sometimes, on opposite sides of the table, but I think we can actually be on the same side here, because shorter permitting times for the TSO for new lines, for overhead lines, would actually mean more grid capacity for more renewable projects. And this, we all know, is very much needed. So can we unite here, make a common front, especially that the discussion in the REPowerEU chapter is focusing on public interest projects. I think this is food for thought if the TSO should not also go into this category. There's major delays on their side because of permitting issues, some different than ours for sure.
I mean, yeah, again, an issue that plays everywhere in Europe. We cannot build all these renewables without the grids. So we need the TSOs and the DSOs for all of these things. And indeed, their permitting also needs to be streamlined. So yes, there is room there for collaboration, because we have the same interest in the long run.
Indeed, indeed. So one last round of thoughts, some conclusions that you might want to draw from today's discussion.
Is this a question for Florian and me, or for anyone else on
anyone? Oh, of course, our panelists can go first, and then open the floor to our attendees. Because I think it was a very good discussion, but we have to draw conclusions and lay a plan to move forward with some solutions that we might address in the upcoming period. It is, as I mentioned, a very good time to do this.
I can start with my views, so Guy,
perfect,
please. So indeed, the moment is very, very good for this industry. I think both in terms of education of local clerks, central authorities, the industry should do its part. And this means initiative on legislative changes, initiative on notifying good practices, initiative, or simply letting know the authorities on what could be done better, what could be improved. We've discussed a lot of very good ideas today. It was a very helpful and fruitful discussion, but it should go the next step as well to somehow start being implemented. And this can be done only through constructive communication between the industry and the authorities. I think this type of discussions as we had today is an excellent opportunity to have a starting point in this.
Yeah, from my side, I would say Romania should not, Romania will build more renewables despite the sort of break that you've had. But you will only have it with a more stable regulatory framework, as we've discussed the whole day. And despite your permitting being relatively efficient, there are simply still lots of places where it can be improved. There are too many applications, it might be too slow, there is a lack of communication between authorities, and these are definitely things that can be improved. And I would like to say that I did not share all of those best practice examples for nothing. These are definitely things that can also be applied in Romania, and they are things that can be applied relatively quickly, and that will lead to an even bigger speed up and an increase in efficiency of the permitting process. So Romania can do better. I'm sure you will build a lot more renewables in the next couple of years, but you just need to get started again.
Jonathan, would you like to add on the solar side here? Because we're the ones supposed to build in the next year.
I would say the same, that that's sometimes what I saw on my school report card, which is good but can improve. And I believe that it's the same for Romania and for Europe as well. I mean, there is nothing stopping renewables, especially solar. The prices are competitive, the technology is available, and the industry is ready to deliver. So we better get ready in terms of permitting as well, in terms of optimizing the process, digitalizing the process, potentially, I would say, one-stop shop if we find the right solutions to streamline it also at local level. And in parallel, we also have to think of what the EU can bring to this file. And the files that have been discussed on the emergency measures and on the REPowerEU, they should help us also reach these targets at a at, let's say, at the best cost possible and sufficiently timely. I mean, we have seen quite good initiatives from the Commission and quite good amendments from the Parliament. We just wait for these amendments, these regulations to be implemented, to see what it means in concrete terms. But I think there is a beacon of hope also in the European legislation to make the process smoother, and we have to, I think, our challenge in the next coming years in Romania and all across Europe would be to say, okay, what are the low-hanging fruits? What are the installations that we need for our energy independence to fight the energy crisis that could be rolled out not in 5 years, not in 10 years, but for the next winter? And this is extremely important, that we identify these areas of lower environmental impact, that the EU pushes for the identification of these areas, and then we pave the way for the future of renewables. Because without this acceleration, we won't respond to the energy crisis. So this is very important that we identify this low-hanging fruit. So this is my takeaway from the current discussions and from what has been said also into this webinar.
Thank you so much. Are there any other opinions or conclusions? If not, I'd actually stress out on your point, Jonathan, about the beacon of hope. I think, yeah, we really need to take this EU beacon of hope and make it a reality, because it's the only way to move forward with our long-term goals, also addressing our short-term goals. And I'd also like to stress out on the idea of Andrea earlier this morning that Romania was a market-driven had a market-driven development in the last year or so, but now it's time finally for the state to pick up the glove and make it into a state-driven energy transition, of course, supported by the very good market conditions. And also, let's not forget that permitting can be actually a key competitive advantage in a race to attract capital, these days, a race which is very important because everybody's developing renewables. It's important to get your developers here and keep your investors here in order to ensure the cheap, reliable, and most importantly, clean energy that the country needs desperately at this moment. Thank you, everybody, for attending, for spending this morning with us on key permitting issues. Thank you. Thanks to all our panelists. Thank you for all your interventions. I think we have some great lessons to learn. And thank you for the organizers as well. And let's hope that we'll meet again soon and, discuss on how we moved forward efficiently on permitting. Thank you and have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
A great day to everybody. Bye.
Bye.